Since we discussed the upper leg last week and the knee, we're going to move on down to the lower leg now and the foot. This should be relatively simple. There are some muscles to learn for the lower leg, but when we get to the foot, we're going to treat it more as shapes. And you'll see historically most drawings of feet are typically not refined to the extent and complexity of a hand. You know, not as much of the tendinous, fibrous look that the hands have, but more simplified into the main broad form. So we're going to actually focus more on that for the feet. But we do want to look at some of the interesting muscles in the lower leg and when they might occur. So if we start with the front of the leg, let's talk about the bones there. We mentioned them briefly a while ago, but we should revisit them. First we have the shin bone, which runs along the front. We talked about it last week, called the tibia. The tibia is a nice long bone running from the kneecap right on down to the inner ankle. So this is an interesting point. The distal end of the tibia is what makes your inner ankle. So we're just going to draw here a simplified kneecap, right? Something like this. And then we have the tibia running down. Now at the lower leg, the bones are much straighter than the upper leg. You know, we talked about the upper leg last week. Let's just do a patella there. And then we'll draw the actual bones here. Last week we talked about that femur coming in at an angle, right? But when we get to the lower leg, that angle straightens out because now this is where the weight is being supported at the 2/3 marker. The other bone on the lower leg we have is the fibula. Now the fibula is a little bit behind and set a little bit lower than the tibia. And so it's going to actually produce the outer ankle, the lateral ankle. So the ankle bones, there's not just one bone, it's two bones. The medial side is the tibia, the lateral side is the fibula there. And it's this is an important note to make because a drawing will always give away the lack of knowledge of the artist if they set the inner and outer ankle bones the same. The lateral side must be lower, and if it's straight, there has to be some indication of a tilt of the leg. You can't just have them level to each other without good cause. And the inner side, the medial side, should always be higher. So we should have this angle of the leg. Bridgman does demonstrate, discuss this angle of the leg because there's another angle as well, you know, running down here. That's the result of the look of some of the muscles we're going to build on top. So keep in mind, the lower ankle should be on the outside. The higher ankle will be on the inside. Those are all the bones that you're going to have to learn for the lower leg. So we can start to build some muscles on here. First muscle we're going to look at is called the tibialis anticus. Now this makes a lot of sense, and it should tell us where this bone or this muscle is. Tibialis runs along the tibia. Anticus, it runs along the front side of the tibia. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So if we consider that this is the tibia there, then it should be a muscle that's running along the front of the tibia. All you have to remember is kind of which side of the tibia it is. When we're dealing with muscles of the front of the leg, consider that the only muscles that are actually attached to the front of the leg are on the lateral side. The muscles that you can see on the medial side from the front are actually muscles from the back that are spilling over. So that'll make more sense as we continue. But let's go ahead and draw a tibialis anticus on here. We can get rid of this fibula for now. Now the tibialis anticus is going to start up here on the lateral side of the tibia. And it's going to run right along the front of the tibia. And it dissipates into this tendon that runs along the front of the ankle bone. So if you flex your leg, or I'm sorry, flex your leg like this, point your toe way up, then this muscle is going to tighten, and you're going to see a little tendon run across the front side of your inner ankle bone, your medial ankle bone. And so that's the tibialis anticus. So it's running right along the front here, dissipating into a tendon down at the bottom. If we continue to build muscles from the tibialis anticus outward lateral to finish off the front side of this leg, we're going to have this group of muscles that are responsible for extending the toes here. And extension of the toes is going to be, keep in mind, extending out this way, whereas flexion is curling your toes. So extension is lifting your toes up. And so we have this muscle that's running along next to the tibialis anticus, and then it dissipates and goes to each of the toes, and that's the extensor digitorum longus. So it's going to start up here, right next to the tibialis anticus, then run all the way down, and then the extensor digitorum longus fans out as tendons and goes to your toes. So when you extend your toes, you can potentially see those tendinous fibers of the extensor digitorum longus. We can go ahead and color code these to make them a little easier to see. So this is our tibialis anticus. And then next to the tibialis anticus, extensor digitorum longus. Both of these muscles, you're going to see more on the top half of the leg. They dissipate into tendons as they get to the lower half. So we're going to look for them bulging up here, and then their tendons down on the foot. One more muscle we're going to look at on the front side, called the peroneus. The peroneus longus. And the peroneus longus, again, it's going to start up top, and it's going to flow all the way down, and then it's going to actually pass on the backside, the posterior side of your fibula, ankle bone. So we're going to start up here. It's going to just trail right on down and dissipate to a tendon behind your lateral ankle bone. This has got this nice curve, nice gentle curve, swooping down to the tendon behind the ankle bone. So we have tibialis anticus, extensor digitorum longus, and peroneus longus. The other muscles, this isn't the whole shape of the leg. We have some other muscles. The other muscles that are comprising the shape of the leg are actually on the outside. I'm sorry, backside. And it's going to be one here and then another one here to create the whole shape of the leg. But to describe what these muscles are here, I want to flip us to the other side of the leg. So if we go to the back side of the leg, not much muscles to consider. Actually, pretty straightforward. We've got this sort of a big bulgy guy here. Bridgman does a pretty good job at describing the shape of them. It dissipates into this tendon down here. So the muscle itself has a bulge on each side, two sides, two bulges next to each other. And then it dissipates into this long tendon that goes behind our heel. This muscle group, this two-bulge muscle group, is called the gastrocnemius. The common name is the calf muscle. The calf muscle. So the gastrocnemius, be more like that, actually. This big bulgy calf muscle And about halfway or so down, I mean, you can even feel where the calf muscle starts to end, and then it just becomes a long tendon down here. Now the tendon down here, the tendon of the calcaneus, where it dissipates to, has a common name, the Achilles heel. So if that tendon is sliced, it's going to render these muscles much less effective. So we need you to consider the bulk muscle here, the gastrocnemius, and that would be this guy here. If we see the front side of the leg, we can see the gastrocnemius poking from the back side of the leg on the medial side, up top. Now, sandwiched between the gastrocnemius and the leg bones is another muscle called the soleus. And it's more of a flat muscle, the soleus. And we'll only see it a little bit. It's this tiny little wedgy shape on the back, poking out from the sides and underneath the gastrocnemius. But on the front, we can see it here, the soleus. And it adds a good amount of shape here to the front. So the back we have to deal with the gastrocnemius, the calf muscle, and then the soleus underneath. Now remember when we talked about the ankle bone and how the lateral side was lower, the medial side was higher, and it created sort of this angle here. Well, the angle is also finished by this angle that heads up that we mentioned was abridgment. Now this angle is intended to cause you to remember the fact that the bulk of the curve, the high point of the curve on the lateral side of the leg is higher than the bulky curves on the medial side. So a leg should have this shape here. Going down to a foot. That is the basic curvature that we're expecting to see with a leg. This higher curve on the outside, which is caused by the peroneus longus, and then it extends all the way down to the lateral ankle bone, the fibula. And then on the inside we have the gastrocnemius and the soleus, and then the ankle bone caused by the tibia on the medial side. So this is the curvature of the leg, and you have to make sure that you describe it properly, or else your leg again will look flat. Kind of like how we talked about the upper leg required some amount of angle to it because of how the femur is angled. Well, the lower leg also, likewise, cannot just be this straight tube. It has to have the correct amount of form where it's all sweeping. We have this nice long curve on the outside and then two curves on the inside and then the correct orientation of the ankle bones. If you miss that, then your leg is just going to look too flat and it won't look like it can support the weight of a human. There are a couple more tendons happening right down around the ankle bones that I want to mention here. Just because it's a possibility that you're going to see them when the foot is being flexed and extended here. So if we look at the, let's do the lateral side of the foot first. If this is the lateral side of our foot, it means our ankle bone is on the lower side, so it's sitting a little bit lower than if it were on the inside of the foot. And we're dealing with two tendons that we're going to look out for, peroneus tendons. Now they both are actually running along the back side of the ankle bone. You're not going to see a real prominent tendon on the front side, but you will see a couple tendons on the back side here. And they're going to run down and under the foot here. But this is where we're going to see them pop up, two potential tendons there. Now the peroneus longus that we talked about is actually not the tendon that's in front. Peroneus longus is the tendon that's behind it. So it's more to the posterior side. The tendon in front of it is actually called the peroneus brevis. And that does originate up in the leg, of course, along with the peroneus longus, but it's a more distal attachment point on the leg than the peroneus longus. So that's why it's a brief, it's a shorter muscle. But we will see it appear as a tendon just behind the ankle bone on the outside. So we'll have the peroneus brevis and then the peroneus longus. The front side, or sorry, the medial side of the foot, which is where the big toe is. Let me just draw a quick one here. A little more arch there. And a big toe. So if we're imagining this nice simple drawing of a medial side of the foot where the big toe is at, the ankle bone is the tibia, and it's higher. You know, the ankle bone's always higher on the inside than the outside. That's where we're going to see it a little higher up here. We're looking for two tendons. Once again, two tendons that we can potentially see, but this time we're going to have a tendon that runs in the front, and we're going to have a tendon that runs in the back. The tendon that runs in the front is conveniently the one that we already talked about, the tibialis anticus. And so that anticus name was going to reinforce the location not only of the muscle but of the tendon, of where we're going to see the tendon in relation to the ankle bone. So it's the tibialis anticus in front. The tendon that we're going to see run behind the ankle bone is the tibialis posterior, which again should make a little bit of sense. So both of these are tibia tendons. So tibialis is in the name. Tibialis anticus running in front of the ankle bone. Tibialis posterior running behind the ankle bone. Aside from that, no other tendons or muscles that I'm going to have you learn. Instead, we're just going to shift our gear towards the actual shapes of the foot now. The foot, as described by Bridgman, has four major shapes to it. So you are going to do the Bridgman drawing to become familiar with those sort of large construction shapes to be able to put a foot together. And then we're going to talk about a few minor points that we want to keep an eye out for that affect the overall shape of the foot. So first of all, we'll look at a foot from the front. Now the foot itself, first of all, let's start off by saying the foot should not be like a wedge shape, like something like this. This is what we see feet appear as in a lot of beginner drawings. You know, just something that's the leg comes down and the foot just runs straight across and it's just flat against the floor. That's not as much how the foot appears, because we have, if we were to imagine the skeleton of the foot, and even pull up our skeleton here, you can see how there's some curvature happening here. And the leg bone does not sit directly over the heel. Now the heel bone, or the calcaneus, is actually extending back. And then it meets up with a set of bones here, which is equivalent to the bones in our wrist. And then it dissipates into metatarsals, which are meta being beyond, just like in the metacarpals, and tarsal being the foot here. So then we have our little phalanges as well. So there's this curvature here, this arch. And the arch is the key to our feet being able to support the weight of an entire human body, be it a 100-pound person, 200-pound person, 300-pound person, or more. If we didn't have an arch in our foot, then there would be a lot of issues associated with it, a lot of painful issues associated with it, and we wouldn't have the balance that we have. So we have to keep in mind that our leg bone is set over the sort of wrist of the foot, not over the heel. And then if we go ahead and flush out a basic foot over that, and then include the arch as well, you're going to see that we have a substantially different looking foot than just the basic wedge block shape. We should have a foot that has a lot more form to it. And we're going to actually see this a nice amount of curvature here on the top of the foot in most cases. So that's the first thing to consider. I don't want any feet that look like this. This is the common one, just a foot that looks like this. It sort of looks like a limpy sock or something like that. We need to have a foot that describes the arch nature of the bones underneath. Aside from that, we can start thinking of it in terms of the shapes. Now, the main bulk of the foot here that we see that's created by all the bones in here, we can imagine almost as a cylinder. So if we're to observe a foot sort of from straight on, kind of looking above, like if you were to just look at your neighbor's foot straight on and down, we could imagine a cylinder here representing the broad nature, the bulk of the main shape of the foot. And that's representing kind of the bones that are in the foot. If we add on top of it the toes, it would be the next step. We'd start with the big toe. And, you know, traditionally, we would not add all the toes together as just one block. In almost all historical statues and paintings, whenever we can get away with it, we show a splitting of the toe and the or the big toe and the four remaining toes, and that gives us a little more shape and variety. It makes it more analogous to the shape of the hand if we can split that big toe. So we want to try and consider that toe as a different shape, and then we'll consider the rest of the toes lumped together. Beyond that, there's just one more thing to consider, one more broad shape, and that is the pad of the foot. Now on the lateral side, there's a pad that when weight is pushed on it, it sort of presses out and helps to plant us and balance us on the ground. So we're going to have this pad that extends out to the side as well, on the lateral side. Remember, big toe always on the inside. So when we start to flesh this out and then include our ankle bones, remember ankle bones can be higher on the inside, lower on the outside. Then we start to get a foot of reasonable shape. Removing some of these construction lines here. This is what our foot looks like when viewed from above and sort of looking down at it. When looking at a foot from the side, it's going to be different on each side, lateral and medial. So we want to consider that as well. The main thing to consider is the nature of the arch and how the arch and the pad are affecting the overall shape. The pad is going to conceal on the lateral side the idea of the arch, whereas the lack of pad on the medial side is going to show the arch of the foot. So if we are to consider basic construction again, we'll start with maybe something like a triangle like this to describe foot. If this is the medial side of the foot, the inside of the foot, we're going to see more of this arch here, going back into the heel. And then at the end of the arch, we're going to see the sort of ball of the foot there, and then the big toe. And that becomes a rather basic foot. Then we could add the additional toes past it. Now, in a portion of the population, not a large portion, a smaller portion of the population, the second toe extends further from the big toe. So we're going to see, a foot where this toe comes out a little bit more. Now, that is indicative of somebody coming from a region by Greece, where that's more prominent. And if we look at Greek sculptures, in almost every Greek sculpture, you're going to see the second toe here is longer than the big toe. And again, it starts to reflect the look of the hand, whereas the second toe, or the second finger, is longer than the middle finger is longer. So it's gonna mirror this idea here if we have the second toe longer. But a larger portion of the population is going to have the second toe shorter. Just be cautious when rendering it, because if it's an even step down from toe to toe to toe, then the feet can start to look clumpy, and when they're drawn from a distance, they can reduce to looking just like a square or a wedge shape. So many artists will push that second toe to add a little extra form and variety to a foot and avoid it from looking too sort of clubbish, if that makes sense. The outside of the foot is going to vary from the inside of the foot and how it looks. So if we draw another one down here, we'll just do the same orientation here. We'll start with a basic triangle, can give you a nice beginning look to it, keeping in mind that that back angle should not be straight up. So if we consider that this is the lateral side of the foot and we have a pad to deal with, if we start with this heel and we'd imagine where there would be an arch here, instead we draw a pad coming out. It's that pad here, that extra fleshy pad. And then from there we have the ball of the foot and then the little toe. And then the toes get progressively longer. Now if you have a longer big toe, it's going to stick out more. If you have a longer second toe will be the longest one out. And from there, everything else will be pretty much the same. Except, of course, the ankle will be lower on the lateral side. So we're going to have something that's closer down here. So that's the primary difference between the view of the lateral side of the foot and the medial side of the foot. Lateral side of the foot, we are dealing with the pad. So it's going to have a convex nature to the curve instead of the concave nature to the curve of the medial side. And that tendon in the back there. So that's the important thing we need to remember about the construction of the foot. We have to think of the main cylinder here, and then the pad as well. So think about that. The main cylinder is going to have more arch to it. It's going to arch this way, and then it dissipates into the pad. As it steps down. So we have the main cylinder, then we have the pad, and then we have the toes on top of that. We treat the four smaller toes as a group, the big toe as its own shape. You keep that in mind, your feet should be pretty solid. Try to, whenever possible, split the big toe from the rest of the feet to add a little bit more shape and interest. Just like we would try to break up the shape of the hand. We would never want to draw hands like this. We would always want to draw hands with a split or a split here or a split like this. Some sort of split in the hands to give it a little more form and shape to it. Likewise, we want to try and split the big toe from the rest of the toes to avoid it appearing just as a big clumpy mess.